After the rather messy and poorly received launch of Mighty No. 9, Kenji Inafune and his company Concept are trying once more with their newest title, Recore. The expectations for this game may have been relatively high, but can Inafune and company manage to redeem themselves, or is this yet another failed experiment? Set on the distant desert planet of Far Eden, Recore tells the story of Jewel Adams, a colonist from Earth sent to this planet to assist in and maintain its terraforming process. Yes, it seems Earth has become uninhabitable due to some sort of disease known as the Dust Devil Plague, resulting in several so-called COREBOTs being sent to Far Eden to build the facilities necessary to make it livable. As it turns out though, things do not go according to plan, as Jewel wakes up to discover that several of the other colonists have seemingly vanished, and that some of the terraforming facilities have been offline for 96 years, or possibly more. She also discovers that most of the COREBOTs have become corrupted and hostile, attacking her at every opportunity. It seems these COREBOTs are now being led by Victor, a COREBOT hell-bent on wiping out what's left of the human race and taking control of Far Eden for himself. In order to stop him, Jewel must traverse this desolate landscape, defeat as many hostile COREBOTs as possible, and collect lots of various cores, in particular the so-called prismatic cores. You see, the COREBOTs are powered by these spherical cores that can be collected and used by Jewel. Most of the cores are mainly used for mechanical upgrades for your companion COREBOTs, but the prismatic cores are used to open locked gates, hidden dungeons, and to generally progress in the game. In addition, they also seem to hold a bit of a secret. Yes, one of the prismatic cores also contains some sort of transmission from Jewel's father, which might help Jewel figure out what has happened and how to fix things. Unfortunately, she needs to decrypt it to access the full transmission, which she can only do at Eden Tower, sort of the main base or enemy stronghold of this world. This is all a rather more complicated journey and undertaking than I might make it seem though, so I guess it's a good thing that Jewel does not have to do it all alone. As I briefly mentioned earlier, Jewel has a helper in the form of a companion COREBOT called Mac. Well, she actually only starts off with Mac, but eventually also gets help from two others called Seth and Duncan. These companions basically follow Jewel around, helping her to defeat enemy COREBOTs, while also providing various extra abilities to help her traverse the landscape. For instance, the Dogbot can sniff out buried secrets, the Spider Thingy can crawl on these rail things, and the Ape form can smash certain rock walls to pieces. The thing is that these abilities are not necessarily tied into the individual COREBOTs themselves, but rather their frames. While you initially can't really use anything other than the standard frames for each core, you'll eventually be able to build and switch around their frames however you like, which can dramatically affect their attacks and powers depending on their core color. That's right, the various COREBOTs and their abilities depend on their colors. For example, Mac is blue and his attacks will therefore work best against enemies of that same color. This also extends to Jewel's weapon, which will eventually be able to fire bullets of 4 different colors: white, blue, yellow, and red. Basically, if an enemy is red, you should use your red bullets and or companion. The color of the cores also determine the type of combatant your companion will be. For example, Duncan, the red companion COREBOT, is more geared towards attack, whereas Seth, the yellow one, is more of a defensive helper. As such, the same frame can have vastly different specs depending on which core you decide to put into it. Either way, Jewel herself has a few tricks up her sleeves as well. As you would expect, she can of course walk and run around relatively normally, but she's also equipped with rocket boosters and a jetpack. This means she can double jump and dash, making it rather easy to traverse large crevices and the like. There is a limit to how far you can dash and or jump, but overall, this works very well. This is all very fortunate as you'll have to utilize these mechanics quite a lot over the course of the game. After all, most of the objectives here require some rather precise platforming as well as some puzzle solving that often involves utilizing these abilities as best you can. While there are some areas that can get rather tricky, I do have to say that the controls are never an issue. Well, I guess it is a bit cumbersome to switch bullet colors in the middle of battle as you have to use the D-pad to do so. No, it's still not that difficult to do, and I'm not quite sure how else they could have handled it, but yeah, it is a bit less than ideal. The same could actually be said about the lock-on system. Again, it usually works as well as can be expected, but it does seem like it has a really nasty habit of losing track of the enemies, and switching between targets is just a crapshoot. Sometimes it works perfectly, other times it refuses to cooperate. Maybe that's just my experience, but it does seem a bit hit and miss. Jewel is also equipped with a grappling hook, which she uses to open certain locks and such, and more importantly to extract cores from enemy COREBOTs. Like I mentioned earlier, these cores are basically used to upgrade your companions, and although they're supposed to have various levels of rarity and quality, I have to say I never noticed any difference between any of them. Basically, both Jewel and her companions gain experience points and level up as you defeat enemies, but your companions only improve slightly in this way. In order to make a bigger difference, you have to use your collected cores to infuse their various stats with more energy, and the various colors determine what gets affected. For example, red cores increase attack power. While this is a decent enough system, it is a bit annoying that you have to do all of this back in your crawler, meaning you constantly have to travel back and forth to upgrade, build, and or switch out your COREBOTs and such. It's also just plain idiotic that you can actually only have 2 of your COREBOTs with you at any one time, increasing the back and forth travel even more. Yeah, for whatever incomprehensible reason, you are only able to bring with you 2 of your COREBOTs outside of your crawler. Sure, this isn't really a problem at first, as it does take a little while before you get more than 1 anyway, but once you do, it just doesn't make any sense to limit you in this way. Seriously, there are plenty of times when you'll need a specific COREBOT, and if you don't happen to have it with you, you're forced to travel all the way back to the crawler, change your available bots, and travel all the way back to where you were. Granted, there are fast travel stations, but they are far from ideal, and you'll still be going back and forth constantly, which gets incredibly tedious. Now, as this is kind of an open world sandbox game, you don't necessarily have to just stick with the main objectives, as there are quite a few optional dungeons and the like as well. Unfortunately, most of these side quests are pretty much identical, and they don't really offer much in terms of rewards or enjoyment. Sure, they're relatively decent, but you'll get really sick of them really fast. It also turns out that these dungeons aren't quite as optional as it first seems. The thing is that you'll need a certain amount of prismatic cores and a certain level of EXP in order to even gain access to the last parts of the game, which honestly makes absolutely no sense. You see, in terms of the story being told, they basically make it seem like Jewel discovers 1 prismatic core, not several, or at least that only 1 of them is all that important. In addition, it just completely ruins any sense of narrative flow to defeat a boss, get told that you have to hurry to the next section due to a storm, only to have the game block you off until you can collect more cores. Even disregarding the possible quote-unquote ludo-narrative dissonance here though, this still doesn't add up. First of all, optional missions are supposed to be just that. Optional. They're not supposed to be obligatory. You should be able to decide for yourself if you want to play them or not without too many consequences either way. Secondly, and more importantly, this absolutely kills this game. Yeah, this is the reason I eventually gave up on this game. It honestly made me so annoyed I actually tossed my controller to the side, threw up my hands, and loudly proclaimed, "Fuck this shit." Basically, I made it to the final section of the game, beat a boss, and was about to traverse the final area to the end, only to get told I needed more cores and a few more levels of experience. This was frustrating, but I actually bore with it and spent quite a while leveling up and tracking down the necessary cores before I returned to finish up the game. I entered the previously restricted area and had to traverse a relatively long and tricky section with some pretty tough battles. When I finally reached a new checkpoint, I was once again told I needed even more cores. Fuck off! Fine, that whole thing could have been avoided if I'd just done more of the side quest as I went, but it's ridiculous that I should have to. In addition, I never once felt like increasing my level actually made any sort of difference, as most fights felt pretty much the same. Sure, when I went back to grind for EXP, the enemies did die quicker, but that could also be due to the improved equipment. All of that said, I have to admit that I ultimately enjoyed most of my time with this game. Although there are quite a few annoyances, and it's way too grindy and artificially lengthened for my tastes, but yeah, I had fun with it. I did run into a few minor glitches and bugs, and while I personally didn't encounter the supposedly excessive loading times, they are quite long nonetheless. Thankfully, there aren't any game-breaking bugs, and like I said, the mechanics do work almost remarkably smoothly for the most part, but unfortunately, the game doesn't quite reach its full potential. I do think a sequel could do well, but this game is missing a few tweaks and adjustments to really justify a recommendation. Yeah, it can be fun, but all in all, Recore is just average at best.